This is how you pour tea.
We're spilling all the tea today, honey.
Can we say that?
Well, hey everybody, it is Tea Time with Tierra time. I'm so excited we're back after a slight little break.
It's like when we take breaks a lot.
Yeah, it's hard being fabulous. It's tiring.
It's hard to be everywhere at the same time.
I know, right? Well, you look amazing.
Thank you, Pete. So do you.
Goodness, did you get like married to a billionaire today or something? Or what
No,
happened? You just came off the
not
yacht,
that.
didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I'm married to myself.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah, you know.
That's
so
amazing.
I am to myself now.
I
To
love
myself, just to me.
I love that. And everybody might notice that we have somebody else here on stage with us. We have Huntsville's premium comedian right here, Ashe Kennedy. How are you doing today, Ashe?
I'm doing pretty great.
Awesome.
Pretty great.
So I'm really excited for us to be back. So Tierra, tell us what has been kind of going on
My
with you.
agenda.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the pandemic really, first of all, it kind of put a damper on how you do things and your plans. And back in November, I had COVID.
Mm-hmm.
In November, 8 people besides myself in my family had it.
Mm.
So we all just kind of camped out together,
Right.
which was better than being by yourself.
Mm.
You know, but in the process of all this process of eliminating is what I called it, because it's like, this doesn't do good for me, that doesn't do good for me, but this does.
Mm.
So I'm going to water what does.
I love that. I think a lot of people are coming to that kind of that decision making. I think the pandemic, in a weird way, is doing a lot of things for us as far as like making us realize what's important, right? Because I mean, people aren't. There's so many people. There's so many jobs that are not filled,
Right.
and I think it's because people are making those quality choices, right?
Yeah, because everybody's thinking like, you know, you could work fast food and still not be able to pay your bills, or you could go find something else and give it a shot, you know.
Right.
And on
right.
the opposite end of the spectrum, there are people that have been wanting to retire.
Mm-hmm.
And the COVID pandemic really helped them make that decision just to go ahead and retire.
Right.
So then you have those jobs that come available. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like people made decisions based on what was important.
I love that. Yeah. I mean,
That's what I did.
And we're in such a time of change right now. I think it's really, I was actually on a podcast earlier today talking about this, about how I think it's really important for us to create our own mission statements, like at least 3 things that are like super important to you, be as specific as you can,
Right.
and then use that as kind of like a litmus test of when it's time to make a decision, let it go through that filter, and if it doesn't fit what your personal agenda is for you, then it's time to look for something else, right?
Yeah, and something else that I discovered during my my time at home, I remember that I always didn't listen to other people enough to realize that I need to understand who they are and where they're coming from, how they see me. Because I believe that once I understood how they see me, what was going on, then I didn't have to really talk back anymore.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense? It was like a
I
battle
guess
between your head and your heart.
Don't you think it's more important how you see yourself? I'm sorry, Ashe.
Oh no, like
that's the
I
whole
get
point, yeah.
I get what you're saying. I had a bit of a perspective shift in too, where, you know, you have this kind of isolation thing that happens, and then you kind of realize you don't always have to necessarily respond to somebody's energy. You know, and a lot of times now, you know, because sometimes if somebody's like in a kind of a combative way or something like that, I will ignore whatever they're kind of saying and think like, what's going on with this person? Like at the core, like, are you actually upset over this, or is there something bigger going on within you? And I can respond with compassion to that part.
I love that. I always see it as like when I was taught how to use a fire extinguisher, about how you point the fire extinguisher at the source and not the flames, right? So you can be arguing with the person on the surface, or like you say, really trying to find out, where is that pain coming from, right?
Right.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
It's like nipping it in the bud.
Yeah. Right?
You know, sort of thing.
And also it's their stuff, right? Like they're like the only reason they're triggered is because they're triggered by something in them. Right? It has nothing to do with you.
And they're just trying to get you on the boat.
Yeah.
They're trying to get you to
exactly.
They're
trying to make you be the reason.
And that was what I did want to do anymore. If I didn't want to hear it, I just wasn't going to absorb it.
Right.
You know, because it kind of shadowed who I really was to a degree. Because I've been growing. This has been an ongoing experience since, gosh, we first started doing Tea Time. You know, because that's when I really had dove into who I was and couldn't find the answers.
I think it's been 7 years, 6 or 7 years.
7 years.
7 years. Yeah, I think it's 2014, right?
2014, that's when I got my name changed. So it may have been right after that.
I believe it was.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy, but it's good though.
So this is really your show, Tierra. So I want you to tell us and tell everybody else, like, what is your purpose or your mission or your objective for this project? I see it as a project.
Me too. And I see it as my intentions for the show is to reach people, not just an entertainer. My purpose, I guess my statement would be is we want to get to know who you are. We want to display your talent. We want to do you for a little bit, you know? And this is one way to, I think, put that statement into mission is to stand up here and let's start now. We're starting, so but I just think it's based on love, joy, peace, harmony. You know, if it ain't any of those things, I just don't have time.
I just love being in your energy. I just adore it.
It's really been a big growth spurt for me lately.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that too with the pandemic? That energy feels so much stronger. Like, because if I've noticed since we've come a little bit out of quarantine, if I'm like in the room and somebody starts having negative energy, I don't even care if it's awkward. I'll just like look at them and walk out, you know, or I'll be like, oh, I can't.
Yeah, it's about making that decision to make the decision of whether do I engage or not in this, and do I allow myself to be a witness or a bystander, or do I simply wish to disengage, right?
Yeah.
And disengaging is not loving.
Right.
You know, because sometimes all you're doing is just perpetuating it. If you stay in it, right?
Right.
Well, you become part of that problem.
Yeah.
If you take it on.
Yeah.
And I don't have any room for that.
Right. I mean, I know this is just for me personally. When I was in my really depressed stage, I was fed by the reaction I got from people, and it kept me in that, because that's the way I knew love. Right.
Yes.
That's the way I knew care.
Yes.
That's the way I got attention. And I'm not saying that for anybody else. I'm just, all I can talk about is so what I'm saying is just that, to that point of where, you know, you disengaging from people, sometimes that just keeps them in that arena, because it keep, you know, sometimes even like when a kid is being outspoken or doing something wrong, it's because they simply want the attention, right? So when you take that attention away, it makes them have to change the paradigm of who they are and, you know, who they'll be. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Makes complete sense.
I love it
because you brought up that that's how you were taught love.
Yeah.
You know, and that is the big thing for me, because I was taught love by calling me names, abusing, just the stuff that you just hear about or read about. You know, it's just part of that, and that's why I chose the relationships I've chosen, because I was making decisions based on that 5-year-old.
Exactly.
You know,
right.
and it just seems...
It's always that 5-year-old.
5-year-old. Yeah.
It's as though, like, you know, a lot of times in those kind of situations, you're taught that love is how unbreakable is the bond, when there's really not a proper bond there. There's just, you know, pain and abusive behaviors and stuff like that. Because it's like, you know, and I try to teach that, you know, with my son in a very different manner of just, if I do something that's upsetting to him, you know, even if I'm in the right or whatever, I validate that he can be upset with me. This is fine. And I make it very clear to him, like, when you grow up, you have the right to choose how much time you want to spend around me, you know, and that responsibility is on me in a lot of ways, you know. And I think that parenting is you know, changing so much from what it was even like when I was growing up, you know, because they did their best, but you know, parents, that's the thing that people don't like to talk about. Parents can abuse their children without having the intention at all.
I completely agree with that.
Growing up in a Christian church was child abuse for me, very specifically, and for a lot of people. That was not the intention that my parents had at all. They wanted a place of solace and love, unconditional love for me. And that was just not my experience, you know.
I mean, they bought into the program, you know, because, I mean, back in that age, there was like this structure, you know, you went to school and you went to college and you found your sweetheart and you bought the Colonial and you had got the station wagon, you had the 2.4 children, you know, it was just this thing, right? And you went to church every Sunday and you know, these types of structures, right? Mm-hmm. And now all that is falling away. I mean, everything is falling away.
The chain is breaking.
Spiritual, you know, government. You know what I mean? I was watching the other day on YouTube. Do you know that they right now can take anybody's face and anybody's voice and make them say anything they want to? There's a program where all you have to do is get a look-alike. And they showed it. They showed Tom Cruise playing guitar and talking. And it was a look-alike of Tom Cruise that they had supplanted his face and his voice on.
So crazy, isn't it?
And so it's going to get to the point of where, what is real? Who do we believe?
Yeah, we're kind of in that direction with things and technology. Right. Just everything.
I mean, are you real?
I think I was. They froze me. I don't know.
They froze you.
Yeah, but I agree. But I remember for me to heal, and this kind of goes in with the little child. For me to heal, I had to go back to my childhood home.
Oh, wow.
And I did that recently. And I knocked on the door, and the lady shut the door and said, I used to live here as a child. And blah, blah, blah. And we carried on a conversation. I just asked her if I could sit on the porch. She said, yeah. So, because, see, on the porch is where all the abuse took place.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And so, from that point on, I left me
there. Were you making amends with yourself or with the house? Or
I was just making amends with everything that had happened to me.
Gotcha.
No longer am I shackled down by what he did to me, what they did to me, whoever. That doesn't. It's water under the bridge.
And this may be a strange question, but did you feel like the house was reaching its arms out to you?
It felt like it was hugging me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, that.
I got that feeling, so I was like, "Oh no, this is gonna be a weird question."
Yeah, and I cried and cried. You know, just had my moment. Yeah. And while I left there, I went to the cemetery to talk to my dad. That was my healing. Started my healing of holding on to stuff like resentment, anger, and it just getting mad. Like we were talking earlier, people get mad at you for not even because you're you, and that was who I was in the past. Just did not give you a time of day. I know it's kind of hard to think about that, but it was that way.
Yeah,
I just put on air.
It's very interesting to me right now because my parents are about to sell my childhood home. It's over near Anniston, and I am having like a lot of weird feelings for that because I experienced a lot of abuse in that house, and it feels interesting because I've thought about going there, and I'm just like, well, what would be the point of me going? What would I want to do? And it's interesting because I feel almost like the opposite would happen to me. Like the little girl that was there, I would want to bring her with me. You know, because I feel like that's just been so. You know, the abuse that I experienced, my, you know, like just every white Protestant family is sweep everything under the rug. You learn how to deal with it on your own, and that's not something that a child can actually carry. And so I'm like, you know, almost 20 years later, working through it and allowing that part of me to experience those feelings. And so that's interesting. That kind of makes me, because I've been like, nah, I think I might be fine, but now I'm thinking this might be, you know, my shot to go. Sit with that.
It is for you. It completely is for you, and for you to be able to pick up that little girl and bring her with you and say it's okay. We made some mistakes, but we're going to do better now. You know?
Yeah, like Maya Angelou says, you know, do better once you
know better, you do better.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So I don't know, I can't. There's so much growth going on that I really am overwhelmed.
I got it.
Like I am so. I don't know what I've experienced or what I haven't, but I do know everything that I've accepted has done me right, without question.
Yeah, and I think that's why sometimes, like people, like really empathetic people like us. Like we have to kind of retract sometimes. You know what I mean? Like we're cool on camera on stage, and then like you won't hear from us for 6 months or a year because we've got to kind of go into our little burrow and kind of heal and grow and come out of our little chrysalis, and then the new butterfly, comes
Yeah.
out.
I get the overwhelmed nature. I've totally cried to my wife and been like, I just want to be emotionally stagnant for a while. I'm tired of growing. I'm so tired. Like, can I just be in some crap for just like 6 more months? Catch up on some credit card bills, But yeah, like it is an exhausting process. But the thing is, once you start like gaining positive coping mechanisms and positive self-talk, like it gets easier and easier as time goes on. It's just like really rough breaking those down, and it is like constant. Like when they talk, like that parenting, that inner child work, it's heavy, and it is really like having a child with you at all times, because you think, all of us being like queer people, LGBT people, there's like this, I had good parents, but I always felt like there was something missing because they couldn't connect to me on this level of understanding. So I, a while back, just thought like, well, if, little 4-year-old Lauren who was like refusing to put on a dress, and like how would I talk to her? Like what would I do to make her feel better? So in that moment when I'm actually upset about that, because I'm thinking that's bullcrap, like I just wanted to like take my baby doll and wear a suit, like
yeah, I'm
like just like let her do it, like it's fascinating to me. I feel like the biggest thing that's actually helped me with growth is the structure of having financial security and health insurance. Like it's amazing to me that we expect people in our country to be able to process and move past trauma when they're constantly in survival mode.
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yes.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, exactly. Yeah,
because it's for years. I tried for years. I had trauma when I was in the military, when I was 20 years old, and I didn't start to work through and process that stuff until I was 31. And I was in counseling, but I couldn't open up. I couldn't experience vulnerability because I was constantly thinking, what's next? Like, how am I going to be able to afford tampons next month? Like, very serious, real problems that are exhausting. And when you add all of that, there's no room for growth. There's no room for that. And there's no reason for us to all suffer like that.
Yes. Oh, that's deep.
Yeah, and I wonder, this is kind of maybe an odd question.
My favorite.
But I wonder, like, okay, for all the trauma that we've all experienced, everybody, even that's watching, has experienced some type of trauma. Now, in the realm of things, what do you think causes one person to suffer with those things more than another one? I know parents, but I'm just saying deep down inside. Do y'all have an answer for that?
I have kind of probably an answer people probably won't want to hear.
I probably need this answer.
So I think it really comes down to a decision. I think it's all based upon a decision, but of course, like we were talking about, those decisions are made at a very vulnerable young age. So, it's a decision of how you're going to see it, how you're going to look at it, and how you're going to frame it. You know what I mean? But the thing of it is, you can reframe it at any point you want to. You can actually change the past by changing your relationship to it in the now.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand it completely.
So, because now you are such a strong, powerful person, and you are such a strong and powerful person. I'm such a strong and powerful person for what we've been through. I actually am so thankful for every bastard I ever came across, and for how horrible my parents were. Thank you so much, because I am friggin' strong.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I'm like, what do you got to bring? Oh, that? Do you know what I've been through?
Exactly.
Nothing.
It does.
Yeah.
It morphs you into.
Yeah. But that was a very painful process to get there, right? But
yes.
And you were talking about the pain, and to really kind of sort of reframe it in a different way. If you think about, like, we have these egoic structures that tell us who we are, and so when that starts to change, it's like that ego is dying. So that's a death, and that's why you have that pain, because it's a death.
There's definitely grief over parts of me that identified as broken.
Right. Oh,
you know?
yeah. Oh, my God.
And then it was such a weird thing now looking back. And I see other people doing it, especially, I'll see that quite often with younger, AFAB comics first getting onto the scene. And I think, oh, man, I was just that way because a lot of my humor was super self-deprecating and I was trying to work through it. I can't do some of the jokes that I did before because they're painful and I don't identify with them anymore. And I don't know, I don't know how much of a choice I made. I feel like things kind of fell into place and just one day it kind of clicked for me. I know I know there are people in my life and some people that I've had to kind of move on from that I think I hate this phrase, but kind of a comfort in misery, but I think that, if it feels like home, then it's going to feel like home. Like there are some times where I'll go into depression even now, which my depressive states are much shorter now. But sometimes I just have to allow myself to kind of enjoy that feeling of laying in the bed and feeling sad because I wasn't
without feeling guilty about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because we have I was talking to my wife about this recently. The way that we structure mental health around men is very closed off. And also, in a lot of ways, they do the same thing with women, too. It's just structured so differently. When it comes down to it, nobody really cares to listen to your trauma. Like, people don't really want to, they'll oh, I'm here for you, but they don't. It's so heavy that when you're hearing all these things, when you're in the midst of it, and people are like, I'm there for you, it's hard to even understand what that means, So it's just I see people in my life, and I try to gather almost a sense of hope that something will click in their mind that they don't have to suffer any longer.
And 2 points for people listening. Number one, sometimes you can't put the trauma into words. And number two, if you're around a lot of people that have been through trauma, sometimes you are gauging your trauma against somebody else's. So maybe you're like, oh, my story isn't as bad as theirs is, but it's still your trauma. It's your experience.
It's very, very, very much so. I'll have because I'll talk about the things I went through in the military, and people are like, oh, my stuff isn't that bad, and I'm like, yeah, it is.
Right.
It doesn't matter what you went through. I've been one of the ways that I've been trying to practice compassion, even in this past year. There's some people that I just. I know there's another comedian, he's highly problematic and stuff like that. And sometimes I just will remind myself that there are parts of his story that if he were to tell me would break my heart, And so I have to think where is he at in his process? And how do I react to him in a way to let him know that he's loved enough to grow as a person, even in the small amount that we interact with one another, because it can make a difference. It is interesting to me, if you look back at your life, there are these extremely poignant people in your life that you maybe met for 20 minutes, or you worked with for a few days at a place, and you remember them. You may not remember their name, but you remember their energy, you remember them showing compassion towards you when you weren't showing compassion towards yourself. We have so much more power than we realize. And I feel really, the point I'm at now, where I feel like I'm becoming a better person. I'm trying not to focus kind of on that idea and focus about the power that I have now that I have these tools, on how I can pay it forward,
Well, you're a fabulous person. There's nothing else there's nothing else that you need to become to be fabulous. But what I wonder, so Ashe healed, will you still be funny?
that is actually a joke of mine. All my jokes were self-deprecating, and then I was like, I don't have any material.
Somebody come beat me so I can laugh about something, right?
You need to change the story to your healing. That becomes, that's my story. It's not, I'm not going to tell any other person what I went through. You know why? Because it doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
And it's just not going to hold that in my heart. I'm serious.
Yeah, and you can see that wave. You can see those people going through it, right? And there's this period of time where they talk to everybody. the people at the
yes.
grocery store line, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you
yeah.
come to a point of where like you don't even think about it anymore. You have to like be reminded, like, oh yeah.
I have a question for you with that though. How where do you find the balance in between when you see somebody who's kind of needing a feeling of solidarity with what they experienced? Because it's hard for me to not it's weird to have like this balance of where if somebody's talking about something that terrible that happened to them, of being like, I've had that, experience as well, and it not sounding just cold, where I'm like, oh yeah, I went through that, but also just in a way of being able to support somebody. Because I think it'd be hard for me to not like ever talk to other people, but I do get what you're saying though,
Yeah.
where it becomes an exhaustive thing where for me it became a part of my identity.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The balance for me is knowing that it's not my responsibility for most things that I used to think was my responsibility.
Oh wow.
It's not really my responsibility to make somebody happy. I like making people happy, but I'm not going to go and jump over fields and mountains and walls to do that, because I've got so much in me that you could just have. You know what I mean? So the balance for me was knowing that I'm not responsible. It sounds harsh. It is. But it's the cutoff. There's a boundary for me now, and I just try not to. I can listen to you, and I don't absorb near as much as I used to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a hard thing for empathetic people. Like, it's really weird. Like, I have a friend that's having shoulder surgery, and I went to my trainer this morning. I was like, my shoulders are really hurting when I do a certain thing, and then like we worked it out, and it was like, it's gone. It's like, oh crap, I picked it up from him. Like, it's just, it's frustrating. You know what I mean?
I get that. I get that. There's it is so hard because growing up, like the word sensitive was a very, very negative word. And it's a confusing thing for me because I'm not like a very emotional person, but I am, it's even hard for me to say, but I'm just like learning to say it. I am an extremely sensitive person. And I mean, whatever it is that connects us as human beings, I've had experiences like that. One day, most of my friends are like, also like I was also a military brat, so we're spread all out. And a few years ago, I woke up and I was in this terrible mood. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I called my friend, she was in Oklahoma, and I said, what are you upset with your husband about? And she was like, he keeps leaving his underwear next to the basket in the bathroom instead of, and like she talked it out, like, but it was so weird because I knew, like I felt it, and I had to be like, oh wait, this isn't mine.
Right.
This isn't mine. I have to do that a lot where I'm thinking with my feelings, and that's so hard being in touch with my feelings. But is this my feeling? Because it's scary. It's scary to do that because before, when I would think about my feelings, I would get wrapped up in them because I had no way to cope with it.
Yeah, and I think for me it's a fine line between how much am I willing to go on that journey with that person to maybe help them out, and then where about, like you say, where do I stop it? Like, okay, this I'm no longer benefiting anybody by doing this, but you can help to. You can help,
yeah.
And I have had to kind of tell people, like I see that you're in a point of your recovery from your trauma. I'm in a point of my recovery. I'm not far enough along to be there for your spot of recovery because it might. Kind of pull me back in. Like I can root for you through the sidelines and stuff, but I don't have that capability yet, and I have to protect what I've got so far.
That is so important. That's actually the most loving thing that you can do, right? Is to take care of yourself and kind of be an example as well, and also make them. Because like it's almost like you can kind of pull them and then you kind of let them go, and then you kind of pull them and let them. There's no constant like pull. Right.
Yes, and I think when you let go, it's kind of like let's see what they learned, let's see what they got going on, and then bring them back.
Because any growth has a stretch and then a recovery and a stretch and recovery. Where when you to the gym, anything else, it's all the same, right?
Yeah,
all are one thing.
I found that just small things. Like I think about. I've gotten better at cooking since the pandemic. So that's my thing. If somebody's sad, like, come over, I'll cook you something, and we don't have to talk about it, you know, but I'll at least sit with you, you know. And that kind of stuff is cool, because sometimes, like, there are some very basic human needs that when you are struggling, you don't even think about it.
Have you ever been in somebody's presence and you just started crying? Something like let go,
right?
Without a word being said, but it's like, so it's about that presence, because words are just, actually, I forget what the quote is, but somebody said that words were meant to confuse. You know what I mean? Because you text somebody, and then the next thing you know, they're like, you said well, and I'm like, that's not at all what I meant.
Key and Peele has a great sketch about that.
Yeah, so it's just kind of the,
right.
It's all about the energy and the presence of it. You know what I mean? And I love that there's become this whole awareness of just holding space for people. You know, I went to a gay spiritual retreat, and it was all about letting people have their voice, but not trying to fix it.
Yeah,
and especially as men, that's really hard, because we want to fix it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Even a gay man, I want to fix it. You know, I want to go to Home Depot down, aisle 10.
I have that exact tendency. And I think I just took a lot of, like, attributes on from my father that way. Like,
yeah.
I just,
my
you're
daughter
crying,
did the
let me
same.
make it stop, which is not what somebody needs to hear
Right.
when they're crying. They need somebody just to, and I'll ask, like, what, do you need support or do you want help?
Oh, I love that you just made a distinction between the two.
Because I'm like, I can sit here with you, or do you want me to hold you? Do you want me to help you find a solution? Do you need both? Like, asking sometimes, because I think it's kind of hard for us to presume that people know what our needs are. I have a question for you, because you're is the correct term, like, drag mom, like a drag mother? And I imagine, especially in that realm where you're dealing with just, like, your queer kids, that's got to be super complex to mother people who have dealt with trauma from society, a lot of times from their home, and still kind of maintain peace within yourself. Mm-hmm. Like what kind of boundaries do you have to set?
Well, for me, I only have a couple of people left under my wing, but for that, I would say I just expect honesty from them to me. If you're dealing with things, I think I misunderstood the question. What was the last part of the question again? What was my balance between?
Like, what are your boundaries?
Boundaries for
boundaries
the
to maintain your peace without having to, like.
I try to live by example, and, like, I have one kid that, of course, Eric. He was my gay son. He died, but we always had conversations, because that's something that I didn't get from anyone. I didn't know what I was talking about. I was always talking out my head. Oh, she's crazy, or he's crazy. It's always that little bit of different, gender announcement that wasn't quite, could really disturb a person. Because I have body dysmorphia, and I just, sometimes I guess that's the only part that I don't know how to finagle. And nothing's going to fix it unless I have surgery. Mm-hmm. But I don't think their boundary, if they're my kid, they're my kid. It's unconditional. Now, I'm not going to sit around and let you do drugs.
Right.
And you're not going to be my kid. I mean, because we're chosen. It's not like I gave birth to him. But he was my chosen child. And now he's sober. I let him go. He's been sober for 2 years now.
Yay.
So that I just have to just say, because if a person really pays attention to your integrity, to your respect, when you let them go, it does something mentally to that person. But it also does something wonderful, or it has the possibilities of doing something wonderful. And that's what happened to Josh. He just turned everything around. And I got to work with him a couple of weeks ago.
So like pushing the bird out of the nest or something?
Yeah,
like that?
Just allowing him to make his mistakes.
Yeah. Oh.
Because
so much wisdom in this room.
That's a hard one I'm trying to learn. I've got a teenager right now, and I mean, in the big scheme of things, totally good kid. But it's like, I feel like teenagehood is really that test of boundary of like, we're so centered on how are you raising your kids? Like, how are you going to help your kids? And at this point, I'm just like, oh, I'm just supposed to give him coping mechanisms to navigate this, because I don't have any control right now. I don't have control over his own personal decisions, which is like a terrifying thing to say, and to, you know, especially in any mom group on Facebook, because they'll be like, my child, you know, I smack him in the face and they listen to me, you know. But I'm like, how can I support him in a way that when he's older and he's dealing with adversity, that he's going to have something to lean on? One of the most humbling parenting moments that has ever happened to me. I used to be a parent that kind of like would yell a lot. And my kid has ADHD, like we all do. And I had made like Post-it notes where I had a morning, after school, and evening list. Because instead of going back and forth with a whole lot of stressful conversation, I would say, is your morning list done? On the list in the morning, his first task was to let our dog out, because he was older and he would pee on the floor if not. So it happened 3 days in a row where he didn't. The dog peed on the floor, and finally, he's like 9 years old, and I was like, what is the very first thing on your morning paper? And he, you know, just naturally kind of stands at attention, and he goes, it says, good morning, you are loved.
Oh
my gosh. And if that didn't just, every ounce of anger just completely left my body, and I thought, what a moment in my life. Like, that was probably one of the most important parenting moments of my life, because I realized I was staring at this child and he was paying attention to everything. Every single tiny detail. You know, and I was just like, I looked at him and I was like, you're right. That is the very first thing you need to know in the morning. The second thing is that the dog is going to pee on the carpet. So we need to make sure that he gets out, you know. And if you have to go to the bathroom really bad, holler at me. I'll go take care of it. But, like, we need to work together as a family. But, oh, man, that moment, you know, was huge, you know.
Well, kudos to you for having that first on the list. Is it okay with you guys if we take a little break? Is there anything y'all want to say before we go take a break real quick?
No, I'm good.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we will be right back.